Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited to have our next third of 4 master classes that we're having during ClarinetFest Virtual. I'm pleased to introduce to you Jane Carl and Diana Haskell. They're going to be working with 3 wonderful students today. Each student will receive 30 minutes of instruction, and we will do our best to stay on time. So, without further ado, I will duck my camera and I will let you know. I will pop back in and let you know when we're at 5 minutes remaining for each student, okay?
Thank you, Jessica, and thanks to the ICA and ClarinetFest for this opportunity to work with some, I'm sure, really incredible students. I'm really looking forward to it, as is Dr. Carl. Dr. Carl, some of you may know, she is the professor of clarinet at University of Missouri, Kansas City Conservatory. She's a close friend and a really wonderful colleague. She's a great player. She has played many different years with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, bass clarinet and also assistant and E-flat. Is that correct? Do I have that all correct?
Okay.
Yes. And she has a wonderful studio at UMKC, 100% placement, job placement. And it's just was a really nice thing that she could step in and we could work together so that you can have the benefit of two players for the price of one. So without further ado, let's see, Matthew, do you go by Matthew?
Yeah, Matthew. Matthew's good.
Okay, and you're playing the Nielsen today, correct?
I am, yes.
Would you like to just play a portion of it maybe so that we have time to work on some things?
Definitely. I wanted to play the third movement, quasi-movement, whatever you want to call it, for you, because I seem to get a lot of work on the first movement and then not so much on the back half.
I get that, absolutely. So when you're ready, we will all turn on mute and go ahead when you are ready.
Okay, great.
Go on ahead whenever you're ready. Okay, let's take a moment to stop right there. There are many things that we can talk about. First of all, really good job, really nice work. How long have you been working on this?
This was sort of my quarantine project, so I started it probably in December. I worked on it this past semester. I've left it alone for a couple of months, so I've worked up this part for the master class.
Well, I really like that you didn't start at the beginning. I think that's really good, because oftentimes when we play this either in a lesson or for a master class, we never get past that bottom. We never get past the first maybe the cadenza, right? The first cadenza. So I want to, I know that Dr. Carl will have some things. I'm just going to throw out one kind of fundamental issue having to do with, just the mechanics of your playing, and then just maybe an idea or two musically. Mm-hmm. The thing that I really would like you to think more about is the idea of the tongue not going towards the reed, but actually kind of pulling away, springing back away from the reed. There are some times when I'm hearing the tongue sound pretty heavy for this piece. And of course, Nielsen was all about melody, which is kind of a funny thing, right? Because we learn it and it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many notes. Oh my gosh, right? And we think it's a big, huge technical thing, but he was really all about musicality. And when I first learned this in high school, I was all about, learning the notes. And then I relearned it with Mr. Hasty at Eastman, and he completely revamped my approach, which was much more singing, much more how to shape phrases, even in the really technical things, to always have a shape, to always know where you're going, and to, make that pretty obvious to the listener, because if an audience member has not heard this before, even today, it's a difficult language in some ways, right? But always when you pick up your clarinet, be thinking melody, beauty, and sometimes beauty can be the opposite of beauty. It includes all of that, but be thinking always melodically. And so what do I mean by saying, well, how does the tongue enter into that? Well, what is tonguing for? What is it? Those of you who are here who may have taken a lesson from me, this is kind of my bandwagon recently. Why do we tongue?
To better define phrases, maybe separate notes.
To separate notes, yeah. What else?
Yeah, I think you can use it to define phrases better.
That's right. You got it. So if we think of our articulation like a consonant in our English language, then how we release is always going to be changing according to what we're playing. And it also then either can enhance or detract from a particular phrase. It isn't just about, how fast we can tongue, which we clarinetists get into all the time. Like, how fast can you tongue? Can you double tongue? Can you triple tongue? But it's really about what we do with that in music. And I think just understanding that and understanding that this is a very melodic piece maybe will help change and just enhance what you are doing. So where did you start? What number?
21.
What? 21. Okay. Yeah, so even there, I hear those first notes as light, and you were pretty stopped and kind of a little harsher with the tongue motion. Like, I would like to hear him a little lighter. Can you try that for me at 21?
Yeah.
So already I sort of like it better. Dr. Carl, I don't know if you want to add anything to this, but I think in this section, this is pretty melodic and not really rushed, and it's not hard, angry, clarinet player. This is a little bit more lilting, a sort of an odd waltz kind of feel. And I think keeping the tongue as light as you did was better. It was interesting because when you first, picked up your clarinet, you went, you know, and you made that really short, and I thought, oh, so in order to achieve this, I think when you go to warm up playing, to play with a very light tongue, I think will actually begin to enhance all of your tonguing in this way, right? Did you kind of feel that when you started playing, it was a really hard, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you tried to play the F sharp, it took a few times for you to realize, oh, it takes a lot more air behind the tongue to do this. Dr. Carl?
So the things that I think about, first of all, Matthew, great job. So when you just think about Nielsen as a composer, what
Mm-hmm.
kind of bucket do you put him in? What era, what ideas come to mind in your head?
In my mind, he's still sort of romantic, where he's
Great.
got some weird chromatic things going on, and some things can be very, very repetitive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Innovalic.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that romantic because he's sort of on the cusp of a lot of different things coming together. But I think that the overall general feeling of from Nielsen is romantic, right? It's really romantic music that is really super hard and often very chromatic. And I think as clarinet players, we get so caught up in the difficulty of it that sometimes we sort of forget. Like, for instance, what Diana just said about this being, this sort of weird waltz. I think if you played it more with that in mind, with this weird sort of lilting little gentle waltz idea, it,
Mm-hmm.
it would be it would be a really nice contrast to some of that other stuff. And I think we get really worried lots of times about the difficult passages, and we kind of brush these off a little bit more. The other thing that I'd sort of like to say about it is one of the things that I think is difficult about playing the clarinet. It's difficult about playing any instrument, but sometimes, I mean, I know all of our special difficulties is just playing in tune with ourselves, especially when we have this really wide range going on, big
Mm-hmm.
leaps, and lots of hard stuff. And I think that and lots of different dynamics. And it sounds to me like when you're getting louder and you're really going after some of this loud stuff, especially, and this can happen, I believe, especially on A clarinet, because we tend to play air clarinet less, right? I mean, we don't, even though you've made this a wonderful quarantine project, our lives are spent playing less A clarinet than we didn't start out in fifth grade with an A clarinet in our hand. Um, so we don't have as much experience working with that instrument to play in tune. And so sometimes when you get really loud, especially when you're low, I hear that sound just get really flat. And when you're playing by yourself, sometimes we don't notice it as much because we don't have to match anybody, right? In this concerto and in like the cadenza situation with those loud honky low notes, I think you have to find a way to make those sound a little bit more in tune with everything else that's around them. So have you spent some time just sitting with your tuner and checking that out and seeing the differences in pitch between ranges and dynamics and that
I
kind of stuff?
have done that, but more in the altissimo,
Yeah,
especially in this piece. I haven't messed around too much with the low honky.
yeah, yeah. So that's one place to take a look. And the thing about a tuner and using a tuner, it's one of our best tools, and yet it's just informational, right? It's not the answer to all the be all and end all to all answers because most of the time we're playing with others, and so the best thing we can do as a musician always is keep our ears open and have that flexibility. But it's really important to try to sound like you're playing in tune with yourself, which sometimes is actually, I think, harder than playing in tune with others because then we have a framework. So those are some concepts that I would sort of think about with this, and to make it feel more like a romantic piece rather than this sort of big scary technical nightmare. It's
Yeah.
still going to be a big scary technical nightmare, but you're going to feel better about it, and it's going to sound better if you approach it more as sort of like maybe like Brahms on steroids.
Yeah,
To
definitely.
end, let's start at 23 if you don't mind, and be first aware of the tongue release on the first B flat. This is espressivo mezzo piano, very singing. And as you go down, like Dr. Carl was saying, make sure that you maintain the same quality of sound all the way down. And we'll talk about the intonation as it comes a little bit. Would you mind starting there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so one of the things I think that is sort of along these same lines is when I hear a crescendo, the sound changes, and it's almost like you're kind of going, oh, and kind of pushing from, you're trying to push from the throat area rather than taking up lower and then keeping the sound quality the same as you get louder. Be careful that you don't start pushing the dynamics. You have a perfectly fine dynamic range without going over the top here.
Okay.
Save that for another area. You know, there are plenty of areas where the Nielsen calls for that really gritty, hard kind of thing, but I don't think this is one of them. You want to show contrast here. So as you are coming up and going into the altissimo register, prevent yourself, kind of remind yourself, I don't really need to push the air through here. Yes, fast air. Yes, lots of wind, but in a really singing style so that the sound remains the same as it did when you started at 23, which was really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's start at 23 again. I had no problem with your intonation that time. Did you have anything, Jane?
No, I was just going to say, piggybacking on what you just said, when you are going up into the altissimo, which you know is kind of scary for all of us, and even though it's not super high here, we kind of, in like the 8th and 9th bars after 23, we're going back and forth across that second break of the clarinet. If you can make sure that you're not tightening up your embouchure and you're not tightening up your throat at all, let your air do all that work. If the reed's really vibrating through there, you're going to get some really wonderful legato, and it's going to be far easier than right now if you're worried about it and you tense up a little bit, and then it gets harder.
Yeah.
Let's save time and start on the 30 seconds, okay, on the E flat.
Sure.
There. Yes, that's much better.
Much better.
I thought that was a beautiful sound.
Great. I
Yeah.
just started thinking deeper.
Yes, think deeper. All right, and let's keep going now. Watch your release of the tongue on the E flat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and here I think not too ta, 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 ta. It was better this time than the first time, but I think you could still lighten it up.
Sure.
Start there. Yeah, not the first E flat. You were still breathing and setting your embouchure, and when that E flat came out, it wasn't as beautiful. It was kind of blah, da, 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 and the second note was fine. From the first note, T da 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 da. One more time. Yes, keep going. Yeah, so be careful with that regrouping and inhaling and, you know, getting the embouchure ready, that you do that soon enough so that there's no pops on those first notes, right? So that the tongue is just the beginning of the sound and it's not making it bumpy or anything in this particular section.
Sure.
Okay, now I want to move on to I wish we had a lot more time to do this. I love this piece so very much. Okay, I'd like to talk about your low E's in the cadenza and the F and the F sharp, right? Okay. By the way, I was spending a little bit of time on this, and I was reading how important the perfect fourth and perfect fifth were for Nielsen, and it's kind of a fun thing to go through and notice where he's using perfect fifth, perfect fourth, where he turns it around or he elongates it, and you have So you see there's a perfect fifth going up, and then there's a perfect fifth coming down. He's always messing with this and using these intervals in many different ways throughout the whole piece. Okay, so let's talk about these low E's, F, F sharp, G, and all that. What is your concept of this cadenza?
It sort of changes every time I get the cadenza out. It's sort of a combination of what I did initially, what my teacher thought. I've listened to some recordings I liked. But I see it initially sort of as plotting on the very low E's, F's, F sharps. The slurred notes are faster and more fleeting. And then when I get to the segue, I speed up, I stop altogether, and then I start the accelerondo. So it's sort of like a accelerondo with a nested accelerondo inside in a way.
Yeah, I think there's some good ideas in there. I want to add that I think there's also a case to be made for it being almost two separate voices. Bum, 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 bum. And so on. And then you have the runs as the second voice. I'd like for you to actually play the upper lines after the low E's, da da dee da 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 dee da, da 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 da, and play 4 of those. So from the E to the F, F sharp, and G, but without the low part at all.
Yeah.
Okay, good. How could you make that a line? Right now, I feel like you're doing one little section, one little section, another one. What if you made it all one line? How would that work? How would you shape that?
I'm thinking it's sort of two statements of the same thing. You have an arpeggio going up, sort of in the throat tones, and then down, higher up. So that could be a unit.
You could almost look at the first two as like, and then the next one, so they kind of do this, right?
Yeah.
Right? Or you could actually make the first two kind of shape, or I would not necessarily crescendo or intensify towards the third one. There are different ways to do it. What I'm after is that you think about it a little bit longer line and without the low notes, because I feel like it's different parts of this clarinetist personality. Same clarinetist, but you know, you've probably read about him, that he was, you know, a little different. And that Nielsen really wrote this to kind of showcase his personality. And I think it's almost like he's arguing with himself in a sense, you know? And so I think a lot of practicing without the two low notes. Now let's talk about the low notes. I also see those as starting slowly as you did and ever so slightly getting a little bit more frantic. And so on, until, as you said, at the segue, it's almost and it's almost kind of metronomic at that point. But at first, really taking it out of rhythm, but not everyone the same. I think for me, it was every one of those was too similar to the last one. And I'd like to see that make a shape, so that you have, instead of thinking, oh, it's just a bunch of notes, you have the top part of this line making a shape and the bottom line making a shape. And then somewhere in there, about 5 or 6 of those, then it's all becomes sort of one. You know, can you try that? So you're going to play the E's, you know, pretty long, just do the low notes and make a line out of this by increasing speed just a little bit.
Sure.
Every time. Oh yeah, but with a beautiful sound. Not but it has to be ringing. Okay. All right. Well, even start it slower. overdo it. I'm exaggerating a little bit right now, but I want you to get this idea of everyone's more urgent than the last. Fast. Okay. And always with beauty of sound. So that, I mean, you know, whenever we practice articulation exercise, I was just talking to one of my students yesterday about this. Anything that you're working on articulation wise is less about the tongue than it is about the sound that comes after the release, right? And these are heavy, but the heaviness comes from the air, not necessarily harsh tongue in this spot. At least that's what I sort of feel like. One more time, just play the first 5 of those. Yeah. Okay, so that's the idea, right? Now try this, and you can even fuss with the upper voice. They don't all have to be the same speed either, right? So you have choices to make. There's a lot more variety, I think, overall is what I'm saying, in trying to make this sound like it's forward motion, not too vertical all the time, and that you're understanding it's really going somewhere, right? Whatever you decide to do, that a person could say, hey, I see what you're doing there. I hear what you're doing there. Okay, so for me, one last thing, I'd like you to try this as written. And I'm going to ask you to tell me what you are trying to achieve. Are you going to work more on the low notes, or are you going to work on the runs above?
The low notes to me are a little easier to make sense of shaping, so I'll try that.
Okay, and all you're going to do is stop on the last line, downbeat D, okay?
Okay.
Okay, yeah. I think that you're starting to get the idea, and I'm hearing that you're listening for this now. Whereas before I felt like it was maybe, oh, you're just kind of playing along with it and, you know, it's all kind of fast. But this helps to define it, you know, and then I think doing more work on the upper lines to try to shape them somehow over the course of 3 or 4 of them instead of just within each individual one. Okay, I kind of like that. Dr. Carl, do you have anything you want to add?
So I was just thinking about it this way, and once in a while, again, the sort of, you know, the technical difficulties of this piece tend to drive us all a little bit crazy. But I was thinking about those low notes, and I was thinking about how we normally hear people play them. And then I was looking back in the piece, and I was asking myself, so what's the last printed dynamic, just out of curiosity? What is the last printed dynamic we have from Nielsen?
So the mezzo forte, if you don't count the con forza.
Absolutely. And con forza means with force, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean fortissimo, right? I mean, con forza it doesn't mean like blow your brains out. So we've got a mezzo forte, although that's how most of us usually play that. We've got this mezzo forte, and then we've got some crescendos, and it says ad libitum con forza. And then when you get to this spot, everything is stopped and it's just us, right? So the next question that I always ask myself at that point is, how loud do I really have to play, right? I mean, I can play as loud as I want, but at the same point, how loud do I need to play these notes really loud to be heard? And the answer is no, right? It's just me. It's me. It's all about me on the stage. So at that point, I can pick and choose a little bit more. So if you're starting out kind of at the apex of your dynamics on those first couple of notes, then the question about where you're going gets even bigger, right? Because you know we can only get so loud before it gets out of hand, and we can't really show a line if we're playing at our loudest at the beginning of the line all the time.
Jane, we've got it's probably almost time to move on.
So that's another thing I would play around with.
Yeah.
Is you know, when you're just playing those low notes, which I really think is a great idea, is just play play around with them dynamically as well as with the speed and the direction of everything, and have it, make it personal rather than making it maybe what you think you see on the page. Make it a personal thing, because when I hear people play this piece and I'm the most impressed, it's usually when they have something to say that is unique and not just the way I hear this piece played by a whole bunch of people. I think, oh, that's a little bit different there. That is great. What a wonderful idea. Why didn't I think of that? So I think that's your challenge.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your playing. Really nice job.
Thank you.
If
Thank
you
you
have
for
any
all your
questions,
comments.
if you have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to get my email. You're welcome to email me with questions.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. I think, is Kyle next? Is that correct?
That's right.
Yes.
Hi,
Click on
Kyle.
that.
And you're playing the Mighty Messager, right?
Yes, the Messager Sceau de Concours.
All right. I would say that maybe you pick a page or so of it. You pick whichever page you want.
All right. If you don't mind, I will start at the Andante on the second page.
That's great.
All right, there we go.
Good. Do you want to talk about that much? Maybe. Just
Yeah, that'll work.
let's talk about that page.
Okay.
That's a good one to talk about a little bit. So I have a couple of thoughts. And, Zoom is imperfect, right?
Right.
So if I'm saying something that you think is not true about what you're doing, then you can just ignore it and we'll move on. But in the beginning, when you have the pianissimo stuff, and you would get to the last notes of those phrases, I would always feel like you weren't really arriving on that note. You were already thinking about getting softer. So I didn't really hear those getting to those B flats as being, oh, here's where I'm going. Instead, I felt like you were just kind of going away really quickly. So that's my first thing. So what do you that's a thought. When you get to those sextuplets, have you played this with piano?
Yes, I have played with a piano.
Great. So what happens? What has to be going on in your head when you get to the sextuplets?
I would be thinking that I am not the main focus. The piano is the main focus since they're playing the main melody.
Right. So you have to really use your ears and try to support musically whatever the piano's doing, right? Which is
Right.
tough when we don't have the pianist with us. And the other thing is, I think just to try to make those as super even as you can make them, right? Some of them are more awkward than others. How did you practice them to make them even? What did you do?
So I did a whole combination of different things, starting off with either slowing it down or trying to play these different patterns with different rhythms.
Mhm.
Like either such as focusing on a specific notes, stopping there, and then playing the rest of them, and then slowly moving to each different note.
Okay. So it sounds like, and again, this situation's kind of odd, but I think you could maybe go back and do a little bit more of that and even some of them out.
Yeah, I do agree.
Yeah, and then when we get down to the cadenza, the thing that I was sort of noticing when we get down to the last two lines of this page, okay, the rubato section, it was where we keep kind of alternating back and forth between forte and piano and the arpeggios. They were a little too similar, and you took a lot of breaths in there. I'm wondering if you could minimize the amounts of breaths because I don't think you need to breathe that often. Number one. And number two, when we get to those eighth notes at the very end, so he's Messager's putting on the brakes here, right? But
Right.
you braked even more than you needed to because then he gives us these long trills with grace notes that again don't have trills. Generally speaking, I think of them as just being decorative. They're like tinsel on the Christmas tree, right? They're not the most meaningful part of things. So I think if you can move through those a little bit towards the end, and because you've said all the important stuff before that in the cadenza, and now you're kind of at what I think of as being the I'm just now transitioning to get out of here. You could make that a little less ponderous and just kind of get through it. Diana, do you have stuff you'd like to offer with that?
I do actually. First of all, I want to just say that I threw in the chat box Carolyn Hartig's nice finale written out cadenza, which is a lot easier to see than what's in the actual part. So if any of you want, it's online. You can also just look it up online sometime. Yes, I'd like to go back a little bit, if you don't mind, to the Andante. I too would love to hear you sustain a little bit at the end of your phrases. I'd like you to start at that on the B flat at the Andante for me, please, and play just the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars or so.
Got it.
Okay, good. So I actually almost hear this as one phrase. And I hear when you're playing it that you make a huge diminuendo on that first B flat and then it starts anew. So I do believe that we need to decay at the end of phrases, but we don't always need to decay the same amount every time we play a phrase, especially if we sort of see that second one is kind of like, oh, it's almost like a coda to the first phrase. It's almost like somebody saying, here's what I want to say. Oh, and by the way. Right? And so I'd like you to play it again. So that first dotted half note B flat, not quite so decayed that I can't hear it all the way through. But with an understanding that you're going to keep going for another measure.
Okay.
Try that.
So same thing, same section again?
Yes. that second dotted half note on the B flat, that was a little less than the first one, and I like that. And see, these kinds of details that we pay attention to as we get to be better and better players, they're what really are interesting, even though it isn't necessarily all of the technical work that we do, and we have to do that too. But it's more interesting. How would I sing this, you know? Because really when we're playing, we're singing through our instrument all the time. And so we want to make sure that we're not getting so focused on all the notes that we lose sight of that. And in fact, sometimes when we start thinking musically, it actually helps the technical things as well. It's really interesting, okay? Now, and the same thing is true then when we're in the sextuplets. How are you shaping those? Are you thinking, you know, 2 beats, da 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 da, or are you thinking or are you thinking
So it seems like I'm trying to follow the notes and think with while trying to still keep it relatively piano.
Yeah. And so even though you're accompanying the piano, because as you rightly said, and as what Jane said, you've said your thing and now you're just accompanying it. But even so, we want it to have some sort of shape always, right? And so that's fine that you're doing that, but you might explore making a longer kind of a phrase out of it. All right. And again, yes, you can work on the technical aspect to make it so fluid and easy that it doesn't sound hard at all. Now I'm going to bug you about a tongue height issue. Okay. When you were 1, 2, 3 to pick up to the 4th bar, and this happened later on in the sextuplets, sometimes your G's, your A flats and B flats, throat tones sounded flat to me, to my ear, a little bit. Now that can be caused by a couple of different things. Do you know what it can be caused by?
It could be caused by, I think, not keeping a stable embouchure, not keeping a consistent tongue position, as well as not using enough air.
Yeah, it can be. And so let's start with the tongue position, because oftentimes, students, when a teacher says, oh, the tongue must be higher, they actually do this. They cup the tip up, and right behind the tip is still really low. And when we play on throat tones, that can really be heard. Okay. And it comes out as a little bit flat. It can also sometimes be if your thumb is not uncovering if it's like hovering too close over the thumb ring, and I can't see to know whether that's what it is. But what I'd like you to do for me right now is to look at that sextuplets and play. And go to the B flat, and let's see whether we can figure out what's happening out of context. Yeah, it's happening even on the F a little bit. Did you notice? Could you describe what happened on your B flat with the pitch?
It seemed like the tongue position wasn't correct because I was trying to give it an adequate amount of support, and I knew that I had the register away far enough from the key to.
Don't even overthink it. So what happened to the B? Play it again and tell me what happens to the pitch of the B flat. Just simple.
It goes flat.
Does it start flat and go up, or does it go sharp and go down?
It goes sharp and then it goes
down. What's happening? Can you hear it or not?
Yeah, I can hear it. It seemed like it sounded like it was going more sharp.
That's right. And that's what I'm hearing. Now, Zoom is funny. Maybe it's the opposite. But the idea is that we want to get to the center, the focus of the B flat, not after we get there, whether it's too sharp or too flat at the start. And I think it's because your tongue's maybe a little low behind the tip. And so I think you want to just think about, I want to hear the middle of that B flat right at the start of it. So we don't have time for that. Okay, so the one I played first was a little sharp. The second one, I found the center more quickly. I'd like you to try it again and find that center of the B flat right away. Don't worry about, oh my gosh, what's my tongue doing, everything. Just keep it really simple and just listen for it.
Okay.
Oh, just go to the B flat again.
Okay.
Better. That was better. One more time. You're starting to listen now. Like, go ahead. So that's going to be something you want to work on, right? And the syllable we want is more like a he, right? He. Now do. Go to the second beat, B flat. Ah, so was that more your thumb not coming off, maybe?
Yeah, that might have been the case.
Ah, okay. Try it again and try to fix that. Getting better. Now we're getting somewhere, you see. And so when we have, these B flats over and over and over again, it's somewhat about the pitch. We have to make sure that we're in the center of those pitches. And so you want to make sure your tongue is not too low. And also now we've discerned that maybe your thumb, and I can't see it, maybe your thumb is hanging too low as you're coming on and off of that B flat, right? Maybe it's too low. It's too close to the ring where your thumb usually goes. But you need to work on that because whether this is an accompaniment figure or something that you are playing that's a solo, you want to make sure that that B flat is super in tune and that we get to the center of the pitch right at the start of the note, right? So I also then noticed, and I started to talk about this, then I jumped around. That's just me. Back to that fifth measure of the andante. It wasn't necessarily so much the pitch, but it was the focus of your F and G that tend to spread a little bit for me. Can you start right on that?
So.
Okay, so I let it spread that time as I grew louder. But when we get louder, especially in the throat register, we need to remain firm. There's a little more pressure that's happening in our mouth. So we have to, not to bite, but we need to maintain the tongue height and the embouchure so that the sound quality remains the same as your beautiful sound was on the B flat and the C. Starting on the E flat, it starts to get a little spread, and on the F and the G, it really spreads. So can you play for me the C, hold the C, and make it your most beautiful ringing C? And don't play the B flat. And this time I'd like you to inhale without any sound or extraneous motion. Just inhale and then play the C. Get to the center of that pitch right away. You play it until you love the way it sounds. Now make that same sound a little softer because we're in pianissimo. Better, and I like it that you're not moving so much because it helps you to get to the beautiful sound at the beginning of the sound without your body and your clarinet chasing each other around your mouth, right? So now let's chain two notes. Let's do C, E flat, and the E flat. Very beautiful. Now, can you tell me if you did something with your embouchure at the end of the C before you moved to the E flat?
I think it might have slightly moved unconsciously.
Ah, you want to try it and try to avoid any motion there? Just use your air. Much better. better. Now go to the F, C, E flat, F. E. One more time. Oh, towards the end of the F, I heard a nice focused F. Did you hear how it was there and then it kind of went spread and then you brought it back?
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, that's good that you're hearing this. Believe it or not, this is great practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're playing all these fast runs or anything that we play, we have to think this way and listen this way, because it's actually going to help us become better players more quickly. If we're spending more time thinking about the kind of sound we get and stopping to fix that and to really mull it over and to listen really carefully, add some of this kind of practicing to your daily work will really help you. And you can do this work in anything, slow, fast. You're just starting with one note, making it as beautiful as you can, and then adding another note to it and just working with those one or two notes until you love it, and then moving on. And this will also help you from getting too flat with your tongue, that your tongue will really start to remain in a higher position on the throat tones, even if you're not really saying to yourself, I need to raise my tongue. You're just doing this, you know what you need to do, and you've got to just listen for it, and it will happen. It will start to happen. But you have to be able to say to yourself, I'm just going to play this note until I love it. And then I'm going to play another note along with that one, and I'm going to play it until I love it, until I'm at the center of each pitch from the start. And I'm connecting them without doing anything here. And it's slow practice. This is very tedious. So maybe our brains can only do this for a short amount of time, but it can be extremely helpful for you, I think, at this point of your development. And we're going to have to stop there. But I want to ask you a question. Where are you in school?
I'm a rising college freshman.
Oh, good. And so where are you going to go to school?
The University of North Texas.
Excellent. It's in clarinet?
Yep.
Great. And who will you be studying with?
I'll be studying under Dr. Philip Paglialonga.
Great. Good for you. Well, I wish you the best. And I will tell you, I think, you're on your way. You're quickly taking what Dr. Carl and I say, and you're applying it right away. And I know you're going to work really hard on these details. And it's the beginning of 4 long years of lots of details, I have to tell you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, people are going to get pickier and pickier, and you're going to be like, wait, what? And then you'll start to realize all of this is working together to make you a much better player, more refined, more mature approach to everything. And that a big part of that is just listening all the time to yourself. Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Carl, anything you want to add?
No, I think it sounds great. And I would just, there's nothing better for anything than slow practice. And it can be tedious, but you learn so much from it. I mean, I learned so much from my own slow practice, and I think that's just the wisest thing to think about. And it also makes you really aware of like what's going on inside your mouth while you're doing that. Are things stable? Are they moving around too much? And then is your embouchure pressure changing all over the place, or is it a little bit more stable? And all of that will really help keep you a little bit more focused in terms of sound and pitch.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Nice job. Really great job.
Yes, thank you for the advice.
Yep, you're welcome. Here we go. Fake Zoom clapping. Yes. All right. Who do we have next?
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited.
Oh, good. Now tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Herman Montoya. I am a recent graduate at Eastern New Mexico University, and I am going to pursue my master's this fall at Texas A&M University of Commerce.
Hey, I know who teaches there.
She's wonderful.
Yes, she is. She really is. And you go by Herman?
Herman, a lot of my professors, when they get to know me, they call me JJ.
JJ.
That's a nickname. So whichever one you feel like you want.
All right. And so what are you playing for us today, JJ?
I'm going to be performing Weber's first concerto for clarinet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what would you like to play? I would say pick maybe, 5 minutes or so of playing.
Okay, I will go ahead and just start from the top and go until, yeah.
Until we yell at you to stop.
Yes, yes.
right, let's stop there for a few moments and maybe we'll hear you a little bit more. Very nice, really musical playing.
Thank you.
I really liked your musicianship a lot. So I know what you're going to be working on next semester.
Yes.
You're going to be working on air support, and you're going to be working on how that relates to articulation. And so that is going to be the bulk of what you're going to be doing right away, and probably for maybe a semester. How do I know this? Well, sometimes it takes a split second for the sound to start after you release the tongue. I hear ha, instead of I hear And anytime I hear that, that tells me even over Zoom that the air is not starting fast enough and quickly enough when you release that tongue. It takes a split second for your air to start going. And sometimes I will also say that when the air isn't necessarily moving really quickly, then the tongue starts getting harder. I seem to be talking about articulation a lot today. And I will tell you that in auditions, and for a number of years, we are seeing that there is more of a sort of generic tonguing style rather than tonguing that's really correct and specific for a composer or for a genre, particular era. And so people might play Mozart the same way that they would play, some really contemporary piece. They tend to use this kind of hard pointed tongue. And so part of what you're going to be doing also is you're going to be exploring not only the tongue release and a lot of air behind that, but also different tongue strokes for different pieces of music, right? And so for Weber, there are some times where we want it to be very kind of pointed, but other times that we want it to be a little less so. Sort of string players, they say brushy when they talk about their bow, which is very similar to what we do with our tongue. They'll say make a brushy stroke. And it's sort of in between legato and staccato. But I want to talk a little bit about this run. And this is measure 119, 120, 121, and 122. I don't know if you have measure numbers or, everybody's got different editions, but it's on this. That.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'd like you to just play that run starting on the low E up to the D for me with as light of tongue as you can and a lot of air. Think, if you wouldn't mind just right now, just say for me, like CH. Yeah. And so sometimes I will use that as a CH syllable, not that you're going to tongue that way, but to understand the shots of air, the amount of air that we need when we're playing. Because if we say, we get away with a little less air, and we really need a lot of air behind the tongue when we're coming up. So, but even before let's just try that from the low C to all the way up to the high D. Really fast air and a lighter tongue rather than a heavy tongue and slow air.
Okay.
Were you happy with that?
It was better than how I feel about it before.
Yes, it was. But I still think at the beginning of the 16th that your air kind of died away and it left you almost. I mean, I like that you're coming back a little bit to start that round a little softer. But I think in so doing, I still need to hear the notes right after the tongue releases. They have to ring, even in soft. Let's try it one more time. And then that's better, much better. And then as you're going up, and I sort of feel like the focus of the tongue kind of goes away and the tongue starts getting a little slappier. It doesn't have that same nice sound as it did on the low notes. So it kind of goes from T, 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 and then all of a sudden the tongue starts to kind of get a little sloppy and slappy. Can you maintain that same nice articulation that you had at the bottom?
Yes.
That's good. And I'm really bugging you, and then I'll let Dr. Carl talk. I'm really on this rampage of articulation. When you got to the high D, it did, like I was saying before, it actually took a split second for you to find the middle of that D, pitch-wise. There it is, okay? I'd like you to get to it right away on the high D. You just start on the G. Every note, you have more time than you think. E up to T, easy. Yes. That was great. That was by far the best one. But the important thing is what you thought, right? And I see a smile. So I think you liked it too.
Yes, it sounded
Yes. Okay.
better.
And then I have to just say, this is really about listening and then stopping to fix and go back and say, no, that didn't really sound right to me. I'm going to try it again another way and see whether I can make it. But we've discerned so far that sometimes your air is a little slow because, and I know that because there's a little delay between your tongue release and when the sound starts. And then also as you're going up, sometimes your air slows down as you go up. And I hear more of this tongue slappy rather than the beautiful sound all the way through. So we've learned a lot, right?
Yes.
And this can be applied to anything, to anything. I would also, I like your dynamics that you're using the Behrman cadenza. But on occasion, I think if you were playing this even with piano, but especially with orchestra, you probably would have to bring up your pianissimos to piano so that if you do an echo, that you can really still hear it.
Okay.
So you want to make sure you're not too soft. You're in a nice big space and it's ringing. We don't always have that benefit, but you just have to recall that, remember that you're going to be playing with other instruments. So you want it to sound, sort of forthright and present enough that you have room, to do something like you wanted to do at the beginning of that cadenza. All right, enough of me blabbing. Dr. Carl.
Nice job. So let's talk a little bit about the very beginning of this, which I think is it's such an iconic beginning. Um, what's going on in the accompaniment when we start playing?
We just have an eighth note.
Right, they're eighth notes, right? How perfect is that? Because it's really like a metronome, right?
Yes.
Okay, so when you were playing it, when you first started playing, and it got better as time went on, but your inner metronome was not happening, and it's so important to keep that in mind because lots of times when we're playing this, sometimes you might be playing this piece for I don't know like ensemble auditions or something, and you're not playing it with piano. And the beginning is all really, really, really designed to show our rhythm in a big way, like how good is our rhythm. So I'd like you to play the beginning a little bit again for me, and I'd like you to keep that eighth note piano thing or orchestra thing, however you want to think of it, going in your head, so that you really can stay on the money with the rhythm and show, yes, I can count well. Great. Most of that was just a lot better. Let me pick apart a couple of places where I'd like it to be even better. Okay, do you have bar numbers?
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. So starting measure 56 for me. And can you play that without the grace notes? Those 4 bars, no grace notes. Okay. So do you have it written out or do you have a grace note for the Fs?
I have a grace note.
Can you leave the grace notes out? No grace notes. That got better. The second one was really pretty good. The first one was a little iffy. Can you try it again? Perfect. Now, I want you to go back in and put the grace note back in, and don't let the grace note mess up your eighth note rhythm on the and of two. Make sure that and of two is exactly where it should be. Okay, that's a lot better than it was, okay? And that's one of those things is that we usually start playing this piece and that rhythm gets sort of neglected because we start playing it with the grace note. And you know, frankly, as clarinet players, we come to grace notes, we come to those kinds of things late in our development, and then we don't know exactly what to do. But it's always really, really important to play things without the grace notes first so that the rhythm is very accurate. Now, let's jump down to measure 64. I'd like you to make sure that you are being Superman with in terms of subdivision here, so that, and the subdivision usually gets messed up in the ties from the quarter notes into either a 16th note or a triplet, right? Can you make sure that you're being honest and on the money with all of those? Let's try that from 64. Okay, better. So when you're subdividing the bars that go into triplets, right? When you're subdividing those quarter notes, what are you thinking about?
Can you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure. So when you've got the D and then you go into triplets, what kind of subdivision are you doing on the Ds?
Triplets. Da, 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 da.
Okay, great. When you get to the bars with the E flat, and then you're going to 16th notes, what kind of subdivision are you doing there?
I've been doing triplets because I have a hard time going into the triplets after.
Okay, that could be why. That was my look of shock and horror. That could be why your E flats aren't quite the right length. Okay, so I'd like you to let's do just a little bit of experiment for a minute. I'd like you to play. I refer to it as subdividing out loud. When you get to the E flat, I don't even want to confound it by making it 16th notes. I want to make it 8th notes for a minute. So it's going to sound like this. Let's see if this read works now after sitting here for an hour. Do you understand what I'm doing? So I'm playing 8th notes on the E flat and triplets on the Ds.
Okay.
Try it.
Well, okay.
Yep, try it again. Good for you. Better. Now play it like it's written, but think that. Okay, the second one was better. You're used to getting off on that E flat super early because you're thinking not in what you need to think in order to be able to be super precise rhythmically. And super precise rhythmically is so important. So that's the way I would practice that with that sort of subdivision out loud. And I do a whole lot of that with my students with different rhythmic things that can be a little bit tricky like that because it really shows you exactly what you need to do. And you get it. Now you just need to practice it and make sure that it's really ingrained in you, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, the other thing I'd like to pick apart a little bit. Do I have time? Yes, I think I do. In measure 54, okay, right before we just did that section, you've got a B flat in measure 54, and then at the beginning of the bar, at the end of the bar, and then another B flat at the end of that. Can you start in 52 for me? And can you listen to all those B flats and be as musical as you are, but try to even out the pitch. Try not to have them kind of do this thing.
Okay.
It was closer pitch-wise, right? Try it again. better. So one of the things that sometimes that we do when we're being musical is we sort of let go of some of the other really important things that we think about. And when we have a bunch of throat tones in a row like that, it doesn't matter what kind of shape we're doing. We have to really zero in on the pitch because otherwise everybody goes, oh, throat tones, and they're really horribly out of tune, right? Because that's the clarinet. But we picked this instrument, so therefore we have to do those kinds of things when we're thinking about stuff. Okay.
Can I just interject one thing here?
Please do.
Well, really, when this is something that I noticed in every orchestra audition, but I know that this happens when there are school auditions as well. It's not always for a clarinet player only, right? And if you're auditioning for an orchestra or some sort of school ensemble, there are different players. And I can tell you from experience that each one of those players has something that really bugs them about playing, okay, at any instrument. It might be a percussion who's really bugged by rhythm. And in every last little rhythm thing, that person will be like, wait, that wasn't right. Or, oh, this was great. That was so rhythmic. And they might not even notice other aspects of a person's playing. Or there might be somebody who's a pitch person who says, oh, wait, those B flats were not right. And that really bothers me. Or there's another person who's a tone person. So when we're learning pieces, we're doing this for an audience, but we also, if you're playing for different things, you want to remember that you have a lot of people who are listening to your playing and they're observing probably, something in their own experience that really bothers them. So be aware of that. Just, I heard somebody one time say, when you're playing an audition, you have to assume that everybody has a different bent about what they really want. And I don't like to prepare that way, but there is an element of truth to that. And the other thing, along with what Dr. Carl is saying, is that in a live space and in a big space, discrepancies between two different B flats as having you play will be magnified. Why?
Because you're able to hear the difference in it with the echoing.
If through the echo, through the reverb, you probably can hear both of those B flats at the same time, because the echo from the first one is, by the time you get to the second pitch, there's still echo from the first one. And if they're slightly off from each other, even though they might be this far away, what ends up happening? The clarinet players, we won't notice, right? But a string player will say, boy, are they playing out of tune? Wow, that's really out of tune. And then you kind of go, well, when we play softer, we go sharp, and that's a throat tone. And they're like, we don't care. We don't care about that. So what is the solution to this? Partly at metronome, but a lot of it has to do with being sure you play in large reverberant spaces on occasion and record yourself, or have somebody listen to you and say, I specifically want you to listen. When I have the same note over the course of a measure or two, does that sound in tune? And you have to do this in little small increments, right? But you really want somebody else there, or a recording device, to check this out, because this becomes a huge deal in auditions. In all you will hear is, oh, you sound out of tune. Well, what does that mean? I checked with the tuner, it sounded fine. But what they may be referring to is a repeated note over the course of a measure or two that comes back and is a different pitch, because maybe you're playing it softer or just not listening. So be careful with that. It becomes a really huge deal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else, Dr. Carl?
Things I think about. Am I muted? No, I'm not. I didn't mute. Good for me. Things I think about in this piece too are measures where there's very little going on in the accompaniment and what that means. And generally speaking, in a Weber concerto, when there's very little going on in the accompaniment, I think that gives me, as a musician, way more rubato freedom. Whereas when I've got the eighth note accompaniment going on, I have to be pretty conscious of lining up at least pretty well with that, because if I don't, I just look like I have bad rhythm. But for instance, when I get to like maybe measure 70, where I've got those eighth notes that go into the 16th notes, or let me find another good one. The one that Diana was talking about a little later, 18, 19, 20, measure like 121, 122. If the orchestra or the piano comes to a halt, that means I can do kind of what I want to do. And those places, I think, really, Vapor was so smart. And he was so smart, of course, because he was writing for a clarinet player that he was traveling around the country with, right? And he had that probably that ongoing conversation. And so in those kinds of passages, I think that you could be freer with what you do and take, I mean, you could take some time at the beginning and then a accelerando up to the top, things like that, to sort of show off. Sure, I can also play very rubato when I don't have eighth notes going on underneath me. Those kinds of spots and that freedom, I think, is a wonderful thing, and we don't get a whole lot of it in life. So I think we have to, like, when we get it, embrace it like crazy. So those are things I would think about, and that's one of the things I like to think about when I'm listening to a piece like this. First of all, there are so many different versions of it, and several years ago now, I was playing this piece with the Kansas City Chamber Orchestra, and I went out and I bought like about 6 different versions of it because I just really wanted to look at the differences in everything from articulation to grace notes to rhythm. Everybody's, and that was great fun for me. But I found what I was really doing in the long run was looking at what was going on in the accompaniment and then asking myself, how much freedom do I have and how much freedom should I have? So when I'm listening to a piece, sometimes I'm listening to the clarinet playing. I think I get a little clarinet centric and caught up in that. But a lot of times I think it's probably even healthier for us just to listen to the accompaniment and then be asking ourselves, how can I work my way into this? How can I really show off myself to my best advantage and not get caught up in, oh, I'm listening to Martin Frust, or I'm listening to Sabina Meyer, or I'm listening to whoever. But after the level of knowing this piece, how can I take these things and make it my own? Where do I have freedom, and where do I need to be strict? And lots of times listening to other people play that doesn't tell me that, but listening to the accompaniment tells me a lot. So that's about it for me.
That's a really good point. All right. So we're kind of coming to the end. I'm curious to know if you have any questions for us, or if anybody has any questions. And once again, I just want to thank you, JJ. You like to be called JJ. Really beautiful playing, nice musicianship. And I'm sure I'll hear all about you from talking with Mary this year. So that's really good. All of you, really great job. It takes a lot of courage to play in a situation like this. And you all did very, very well. Very good playing by all 3 of you. Are there any questions for us for the last couple of minutes?
I have a question.
Sure.
So preparing for orchestral auditions and stuff like that, what is some advice you would give someone who is preparing for auditions?
Well, I would say that, playing excerpts is actually one of the quickest ways to improve your playing, because there's so much that can be discussed and fixed within a very short, concise, compressed little area of time. So I would spend the next few years just immersed in some fundamental work. I think you're going to find that that you want to do with air and articulation, but also in a little bit rhythm, and then a lot of work on excerpts, and play for a lot of different people. Play excerpts for people who sit in orchestras like me, and there are many others. Try to play as much as you can, wherever it is. Play in orchestra as much as you can. Listen like crazy. And have a lot of mock auditions before you actually take an audition. I used to recommend 3 mock auditions per audition. Now I recommend 10. And there are some people who say even more than that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it's a lot of work. It's a lot of detailed work. You have sort of, I think, what I would call a good attitude, if you can maintain it, where you are able to stay a little detached from it, and you're able to take what everybody says and kind of try to apply it, and then go, okay, I'm going to take what I can and not get too stressed about it. And I think that's key when we take auditions, but it's honestly, it can be kind of stressful. Dr. Carl, anything you want to add?
I would say too that, you know, the more you can record yourself playing excerpts and listen back and be just hyper attentive to the level of pickiness about every single detail, every single note. And the more you record yourself and listen, the more you learn what you sound like outside your head. You know, when we're listening right here, it's a very different experience than when someone is 10 feet away from you or 100 feet away from you. And you know, if you're taking an orchestra audition, hopefully you're going to be in a pretty big space. And we don't always tend to practice in a big space. And we also don't listen to ourselves in a big space. We listen right here normally. And so the more you can just record yourself and get a sense of how you sound from various distances away from you, that can be really, really helpful because it's different. And then you can sort of learn up front, like this is how that sounded. It felt like this here, but it sounded like that there. So that can really inform what you do in a closer situation, I think.
Excellent. Any other questions from anybody else?
Such a great masterclass.
Thank you.
Well, if we have no more questions, as Diana and Jane said, you can reach out to them with any comments or questions that you have. And I want to thank Herman, Kyle, and Matthew for playing and putting yourself out there. This is such a bizarre world where we're playing over the computer instead of in person. It's a bit uncomfortable because you have so many additional variables already when you're stressed out. So thank you guys for doing that. We have tons more sessions happening today. This is our last live session, and if you joined us late, this video will be up on YouTube pretty shortly, so be sure to look for that. And thank you again to Diana and Jane for your incredible advice. And Diana, have a wonderful vacation. Jane, have a great vacation. And we will see you all again shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ClarinetFest. Thank you so much for all you're doing.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.